and Technology.
Dr. Johnson, members of the board, and Mr. Thurman, good afternoon. The first item is a 21st century technology item, classroom item that I have today. In your packet, you'll find the executive summary consisting of approximate boards needed in each school. You'll also find quotes on two possible solutions, with the traditional classroom quote being the option after some consideration and talking to specialists for the mobile classrooms, which are our trailers. The DeKalb County School District currently has 6,158 classrooms. During the Splost 3 initiative and project, the DeKalb County School District outfitted approximately 4,219 classrooms with Promethean interactive boards, which was considered to be phase 1 of the 21st Century Classroom Interactive Project. The district will now begin, pending approval, the process of completing phase 2 of the 21st Century Interactive Board Project, pending board approval. The district currently has approximately 1,939 classrooms and an additional 305 trailers that need to be completed during phase 2. Well, one of the reasons why we decided to go to state contract with this bid is because we actually secured lesser an amount of cost regarding the boards by taking this to state contract than we did with actually sending it out for RFP. So it is recommended that the Board of Education approve CDWG to provide interactive board solution services, optional components, and accessories at a cost not to exceed $9 million. The purchase is being made via the Georgia contract number 99999 SPD 000048-0018.
Is there any discussion, Mr. Coleman? I'm sorry.
All right. Just a couple of questions about this from the RFP process specifically. Obviously, this is a reasonably large contract amount, and so I imagine it was a competitive bid process. Could you talk about the comparison between this particular contract and some of the other key contracts that you evaluated, or key proposals you evaluated in the RFP process, particularly with relation? A couple of firms have obviously come up in the debate about this. Could you just talk to those different providers and why this provider was superior?
Well, sure. Good question, Mr. Coleman. Actually, we went out for RFP three times. And so after looking at everything, we actually were able to go through. There wasn't really that much of a difference in providers, quite honestly. And there are some key things that I can bring to your attention. One of which is we felt that, and my staff most importantly felt that the Promethean board was a slightly better board than the other two competitors. And actually, in putting it out three times, we only had two boards that were submitted each time. One was Promethean and one was Panasonic. Currently, right now, the district has over 60+% of their boards on a Promethean system, along with the software package, which is just as important. When you go through and you look, the main difference we saw, which was on the short throw projector, which is what we want, is the price. And so going with a Promethean board, we don't have to pay the licenses for that board. If we go with a Panasonic board, which you have to pay, actually the quote was $499 per board, whereas going with the Promethean board, we actually got the license for free. And so that's what made it the cost better. Actually, the cost was lower during the RFP. We thought that was the lowest we could get it, but actually when we went to state contract, they actually beat out both of the prices that were on the actual RFP. And so we felt safe with that being a state approved vendor. And also, we've done work over the years with the reseller as well, so we felt comfortable with that as well. But there really wasn't much of a difference. Also, the relocation services, for the state contract, they actually met everything that we asked for on the RFP, including the relocation services, which is really important, because as we move a particular item from a trailer or from a different school, the relocation services were $273 versus on the high end for the relocation services for the other was $424. So there was a drastic difference in that as well.
And could you talk to, you mentioned that you went to RFP 3 on 3 separate occasions for this. Would you just explain to us what that process was and why you had to go back out 2 more times after the initial RFP?
Well, the process is, the first time we went out, we only received 1 bid. And with an item this large, we felt that was a problem. The second time we went out, we received 2 bids, but we had some issues regarding the way things had went out from a purchasing standpoint, so we decided to rebid it again. And so we rebid it again. We checked into the state contract piece to see if we could get a cheaper deal. And so rather than move forward with the 3rd RFP, we actually took some time, assessed the state contract, and saw that we could get a cheaper price. And so that's when we pulled back, talked with purchasing and our legal division to see if that was applicable, and it was. And so that's when we decided to move forward.
Mr. Mayfield?
Yeah, and my question, I think you answered it at the end. My question was really more of a process because of this letter that we got from, I guess this EDCO. I was curious as to whether or not we vetted our process, if you will, to make sure that we did what we said we would do through our policies.
Yes, sir. We vetted our process, and speaking with Mr. Ramsey and the counsel that he suggested, and also with our purchasing department, we actually felt that we were in compliance.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it.
No further questions. We have additional?
Yeah.
Mr. McMahon?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Brantley, on this, who does the installation of these boards?
The installation is done by a company called eBright.
eBright?
Yes.
And that is the difference between the purchase amount, and it wasn't in our packet, what the installation costs were.
Well, the installation cost is included in the actual quote. So if you look at your packet right here, they don't always define it out in the quote, but if you look at the actual quote that's listed for $2,892, if you look at where it says $747, that's included on there, that makes up the whole $2,892. That's the services that's included in the $2,892.
Right. So we had, so when I ran the numbers on both of those, it was like $7 million. So 305 of the outdoor, of the trailer boards, and then 1935.
No, that's just an option. And I want to clarify that. We got 2 quotes from CDW.
Right.
And we were looking at the mobile piece that they had, okay? And so after looking at that and talking with the staff, we found that from a security standpoint, that we really hadn't had any issues with vandalism with our active boards. So we decided that, and currently right now we have no mobile solutions in trailers. So we decided that we would go through and put the short throw projector in the classroom, which is the $2,892. The $4,000 quote was just a quote for mobile services.
All right, because that's what I saw in my packet, was the higher priced one for the 305 in the trailer.
That was an option, but again, after going back and talking with staff and looking at what issues that we've had from a security standpoint with
No, I get it.
boards, we decided.
This is still just a financial question.
Yeah.
So we're not doing 1938. We're switching the 305 trailers and adding those to the other ones. Is that correct?
We will do 1,939 classrooms along with 305 trailers at a cost of $2,892.
Cool.
Thank you, if we have no additional discussion, is there any opposition to placing this item on the consent agenda?
No, I just did the math. So we got 2,244 whiteboards, which is 305,1939, times 2982, $6,691,608.
Correct.
All right.
And let me explain that to you. Typically, we've come to the board with 3 Splost items and have asked for the entire amount. As we've gone through, we've completed 1 and have come under and are working on 2 on the second one, which I believe was a $19 million item that we're drastically under. We've achieved savings in all of them. Although we ask, we still have a firm with URS that we're responsible for and that we work with, so we completely stay up under that cost. I know it's cheaper, but at the same time, if we need to spend an extra $100 or $200 because of a particular item of not estimating rooms correctly, I would hate to come back to the board for that. These numbers on rooms are approximate numbers. We could get to a classroom or get to a trailer and see that we have, 8 more trailers that we have to do, or 9 more classrooms that we have to do. Those are things that we have to look at. They're approximate numbers. We think we got it right, but we're not perfect.
So you're asking for discretionary funds?
I'm asking for you to approve the entire $9 million that the tax base approved.
Sure.
And allow us. Right now, we feel we're going to be drastically under based off of the numbers, and so we're going to keep an eye on it. We know we won't spend the $9 million.
I get that, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the clarity. So if our IT department's asking for $9 million to purchase $6.7 million, and we need am I correct, and a $2.3 million cushion for unforeseen costs? 2.2? Yeah, 2.3. So I'm just trying to, in my head, that's a big unforeseen cost.
I wouldn't say it was unforeseen cost. I'm just asking for the entire amount. I've shown over the last 2 projects, and my staff has shown that we've come up under the actual price. I'm actually.
No, I get it, and I appreciate you being under the actual. Yeah. I'm just saying, for me, I'm good. Give me similar to our, diagnostic, $500,000 for our IEPs, right? We just had it. So anyway, Superintendent, go ahead.
No, Jim.
Can I let this is Mr. William Clars. He's the lead project manager.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. One of the things that also we have to take in consideration is the mobile unit that you talked about. There are places, classrooms, where we will not be able to put a regular mounted board, whether they have glass or the wall or what have you. So you're going to get a fluctuation, first of all, in the actual number of mobile units that would really be required. There definitely will be some. Until we actually go out and do site surveys of each individual room, we won't know. As far as, so that's a quantity there. Additionally, there are special cases where, particularly like in labs and things like that, the school are requesting additional cabling, where our standard board would be right in the front of the classroom. We use the standard figure. There are going to be places where we're going to have to do additionally cabling. Taking in consideration those things, as there's going to be, there can be a big fluctuation. For example, if each school requires additional mobile board or 2 or what have you, you really plan around with your fluctuation until we actually do get a site survey for the school. So those are a couple reasons automatically where we would have to do that.
I guess, and
Mr.
I'm
Coble.
hearing, I hear what Mr. McMahon's saying now. I mean, I think that the difficulty is that I understand some buffer. I think what he's pointing out is it's a 39% buffer at this point. So that's $2.5 million over the cost, which seems like it would be more than what you're describing in terms of the potential variances. I mean, that would have to be a pretty substantial variance. So why wouldn't we, make the request something closer? And then if there were really substantial variances as described in a 39% overrun, then we could come and consider it again.
I think it's 28, but still.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thurman?
And it's all about perspective. Now, share with the board and the viewing audience the amount of dollars saved on your first two projects. Let's go back, because it almost appears as if they're not being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, when in fact, on the two previous projects, they've been just the opposite. And I think that would help the board kind of create a little bit more confidence in what they're doing. You mentioned it, but you didn't detail it.
Correct. Currently, on our two projects, we've come under through I think with my staff, amazing negotiations on projects. We've saved $7 million on projects to date.
How much on the first project?
On the first project, which was $19 million, we saved $5 million on the $19 million project.
And obviously, you saved $2 million on the second project.
Correct.
And the project amounts were actually project amounts approved by the voters, which hypothetically could have been spent or used, but because of your due diligence and that of the staff, you've actually saved the school district $7 million to date. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is the third project.
Yes, sir.
And the board, I just want you all, and what I want to do is thank you for your stewardship, right? Now, the board is really questioning whether or not you will maintain that type of stewardship and fiduciary responsibility on the third project. And as we get to the third project, I just don't want us to lose sight of the good work they've done on the first two.
Thank you.
Right? Because sometimes if you ignore what's already been done, then there are many people in the public, rightfully so, that will get a very, very negative impression of something that, based on the evidence, they've done an outstanding job to this point. And however we decide to go forward on the third project, it just behooves all of us to thank them for the work they've already done on the first two and saving $7 million.
Mr. Mayfield?
Yeah, I understand what Mr. Brantley is saying, and I certainly understand the point that Mr. McMahon has raised. I think the real challenge, and I don't want to get on a soapbox here, I think the real challenge is the process, because we have to be responsible to taxpayers for accounting for how we spend the dollars. Two things clearly I think that as a board we need to, perhaps at a retreat, come to terms with, is how do we hold the process accountable. An example here is that on the back end, because we know we've allocated by virtue of what we've asked the taxpayers to support in the Splost, on a project-based list, what we are legally allowed to spend on a project based on that declaration before we actually ask for that vote from the public. But what we don't have strategically as a board are mechanisms to actually hold the entire process accountable, so that when we do have an opportunity for savings, or when we do need to understand overruns, that we have a process that basically clarifies that. So that's a long way of saying the $9 million is legally available to be spent on this project, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to the system and to the public to make sure that on the back end that we follow the process.
And I agree, and I would just suggest to the board that you all obviously have a very good process in place, but because of your oversight, that directly resulted in the savings of $7 million. And I know it can be better, but I'm just complimenting you all for your, as Mr. McMahon said, the buck ultimately stops with the board and not with the superintendent. So if Mr. Brantley and his staff saved $7 million, that's due to your oversight.
I might argue that, but
And I'm not anybody's campaign manager, but, it's just me looking at it, that's what I see, that you all, because of your oversight and your concern, that you all have made sure that this man has done his job, and as a result of that, he saved $7 million. And I would expect that you all want him to continue to save money whenever, is that correct?
Yes. Mr. Orson?
Yeah, I don't think this in any way detracts from your success on these previous projects. I think the discomfort here for me is when we know going in that the numbers add up in the 7 million range, I don't think it's prudent for us to approve an amount substantially in excess of that. Because at this point, your best professional estimation, based on what you've told us here, is that this comes out to about 6.8, 6.9 or something like that. And while the 9 million is legally available, as we know, to the extent we save those monies, we are able to redeploy them under the Splost law if we have excess funds at the end of it. So I think it's great. If you're able to get us in at 7 on something 9, just at my own comfort level, I'm comfortable authorizing 7, and if you come in and say at the end of the day it ends up being 6, we are going to be even happier. Not to give you an impossible challenge, but that's the context in which my comfort is. I'm not comfortable at 9 when you come to us with a projection that it's at 6.8, and it is just about what the numbers tell us and nothing more.
I'm sorry, Mr. Superintendent, and then Dr. Marley.
I understand. We don't have any problem with that. But the only thing my concern is that everything remains in the proper context. And in order to have the proper context, you have to look at all of the facts. And I just wanted to make sure that the reputation of this particular department was not besmirched by suggestions that they have had cost overruns or hadn't been good stewards of the dollars, when actually it's been just the opposite. Now, my only concern is that if we lower it and if there are some additional costs, then you put yourself having to come, you've had a cost overrun. And that's played out in a very, very negative posture, when in fact we almost set up a scenario where they fail. So that's the other side of the concern. Not Ty, but there are some journalists, and not Andrew either, who will always look at the most negative light in terms of how it's articulated. Right. That's my concern. Much better to come in under budget than to have to be over and then come back and ask for more money.
Dr. Marley.
Yeah, I just want to get some clarification, because I think on one hand it seems as if, John seems to be concerned about the fact that you're asking for more than what you're actually saying that might be needed, and then seems from Thad is saying that it shouldn't cost that much. I think that, again, as a board, if we're going to be jack of all trades and master of none, and not trusting the people that are actually out here doing this, because I'm not into technology, but I do know that technology costs, is I'd rather go in and have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So can we come to a consensus as to what amount? And I agree with the superintendent is that most certainly we don't want to overrun, because if they go in and it's 7 or 8 or 9, and they've already stated that there are going to be some other lines that need to be done. You have the portables that are out there. So you cannot estimate, and we don't want to guesstimate. And you start guesstimating on people's money, that brings up another problem. So what does this say about us as a board, that we're not being prepared and being prudent in what's needed and what could be, and saying I'd rather know that we came up with an amount and they saved 2 or 3 million, as they've done before with the 719, how much ever has been saved, than to know that we went in and they come back to us and saying, you know what, we were under budgeted and we needed 3 more million, and then we're going to have another problem. So I think that we need to come to a consensus as to what are we going to allow, and not being, again, so nitpicky with every little thing that you can't do this, you can't do that. When are we going to trust the people who are actually the experts in these fields to be able to do what needs to be done? And I guess that's my concern. And when we begin to look at what they've done in the past, what we're trying to change, what has been done or what hasn't been done in the past, but every time we seem to get there, then there's another question as to whether we can really trust them to be able to do it. I don't want to be the technologist. I don't want to be a project manager. If that's what I want to do, I wouldn't be sitting here on the board.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell?
Irwin.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Mr. Brantley, I trust you.
Blame you.
I just have a couple of basic questions. Can you explain the site survey?
Technology's not working. Okay, there it is. I actually let the person I trust who does the site survey explain it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry. This is
I
Mr.
actually wanted to talk to him. I'm joking.
Okay. This is Mr. William Clowers. He's actually a project manager for.
What was the last name again?
William Clowers.
Flowers.
Yes. And he's a project manager, lead project manager for a lot of our Splost initiatives, particularly this one.
Well, it's a good thing to be trusted. Also, I've installed about roughly 90% of the boards. As a matter of fact, I started off the first one here, and I've worked with from the manufacturer to our subcontractors as far as installation. So I've seen maybe one or two boards. But in other words, what we do is we coordinate with the vendor. They have to go out and look at every classroom. And because we have some classrooms where they're not permanent walls, and you can't really put a board up on there because of the weight constraints. But they go in, they walk into each classroom, identify that classroom, say, okay, we got power here, we got data for a computer here. We look at this room, yes, we can mount a board there. Now they're going to go into some schools and the rooms are sort of catty-cornered, or the teachers are the principals, they're using as much space as they possibly can. It may almost look like it's a cubby hole, but you can get a mobile board in that cubby hole, and they can go forward with construction. Or you may have a place where they're actually using the gym, where you can roll a board in and they can actually do instruction. Also, we have special cases like what we call labs, and we would actually have cabling that has to go not only from just in the front of the classroom, which would come with the standard board. They actually have to do cabling all the way back to the end of the classrooms. And right now, the number of these actual classrooms, we really don't have a handle on. Those will go to the 4,000 versus the 2,000. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do is once we actually start rolling these things out, we want to be able to try to get them installed as expediently as possible and not have to come back and say, we thought we only needed 400 mobiles. Now we need 1,000 mobiles. I don't know the exact numbers, but that's the essence of a site survey. We look at every room, and the room that can get a board that can be used for instruction. That's what we do to install them.
So you're telling us that this is not an exact science?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Campbell?
Irwin.
I'm sorry, Dr. Irwin, you still on?
Yeah, I got a couple more questions. And I guess I'm kind of getting confused about the mobile and non-mobile board. I thought we weren't buying any mobile boards.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There are places
That are going to require a mobile
that
board?
will require mobiles. But like I say, some of the rooms, some of our classrooms are a lot older, and they just stuck up walls and things like that, and they're not permanent walls. And if you mount one of these heavy boards on there, we run a risk. First of all, we wouldn't do it,
Right.
but the board could fall.
So it's not just cable costs, it's also construction costs too, in case you have to, I guess, sturdy up a wall or...
Well, we don't actually sturdy up the wall, but we identify whether that wall is strong enough or any wall that we're trying to use in that room.
So what if none of the walls are strong
So
enough?
we roll in wheels. We roll in a mobile unit to say, okay, you can have instruction now. That's the difference between the mobile versus the short throw mounted solution against the wall.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Campbell.
Superintendent Thurman and Mr. Brantley, great discussion about this. I guess it's the estimate of cost to be put in. I'm going to kind of err on the side of caution with some of these other people on the panel. It concerns me. I think the job has been well done when you look at some of the prior projects that we can do an estimate and come in under that estimate. But in this particular instance, when we have a $9 million projected cost, and we say that it appears that the actual cost is 6.8, and we do get to about a 33% reserve, roughly 33% reserve, excuse me. My concern is, are we actually doing the best estimate that we can do on that? And along with what Mr. McMahon said, does it make sense in this case to lower that estimate or to lower that request to a small amount? And then if we get to a point that you need to come back and say, well, we asked for 7.5, it actually came back 7.8, then that makes sense to us. It makes sense to me. But if we ask for $9 million on a $6.8 million cost, that really does sound like we got a 33% reserve. And we got some variables that have been well addressed and well discussed, but that's a significant amount of reserve that we're setting aside.
Mr. Thurman.
Yeah, we don't have any problem. How was and this is my question because I was not here, how was the original estimate developed when it went into the Splost? Because that was based on something. It wasn't just a number of people pulled out of the air. There were some people, or it could have been, but there were individuals who believed. I'm not going there today, so I'm not going there. Apparently, there were some persons who sat in my seat in these seats who believed that the cost was $9 million. Is that not right, or am I wrong? I don't know. How was that original estimate developed?
Well, I can add this. I wasn't here either. But what I can say...
Who was here then?
Thad and I were on this.
Well, I think I do have
It has many fathers, but failures and orphans, right? So the point is, if you're a failure, no one will own you. But help me. How do we develop the original estimate? Because somebody's either over or under.
Well, this is what I think happened. There's two things. Number one, at the time, I truly do believe that the cost of the boards probably could have been higher. That's number one. Okay. The second piece is, over the course of that time, you had a lot of PTAs and a lot of different school different partnerships with schools and businesses or whoever, parents who have actually bought boards for their school. And so we've seen that happen over time, including Title I purchases over that course of time. So it's decreased the board from that time. That's my...
Yeah, and another aspect, the boards that we were purchasing were close to about $4,300 a board. Versus
back then.
Up to the yes.
Finally, we find somebody. No, that's a good thing. So you helped to develop the original estimate.
No, I went through the RFP process, but no, I wasn't actually involved with the estimate.
And it must be someone.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry.
No, somebody, Dr. Thompson, somebody was here. Anybody remember?
It's an estimate.
It's
Mr.
We're going to say the same thing, I think, which is, it's like any of these projects on the Splost. You know, we estimated the elementary schools would cost $22 million. By the time we actually authorized them, we came at a different number because this vote was 2.5 years ago. I don't know. It's some time ago.
Well, and the estimate was 2 years before that.
Right.
So, I mean, in terms of... Right.
Yeah, and so I think that it's that process, and that's why the process is imperfect when you get to the actual request. And I would like to just suggest, and I heard you sort of suggest that number, would allow a 10% kind of cushion of $7.5 million, that we authorize $7.5 million now.
I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I really just want to get the kids and the boards in the room.
But that gives you, that gives you a 20% flip on going to mobiles.
Yeah.
On my rough estimate, it gives you the room. If you had to go 20% mobile, based on the difference in cost, it would give you the ability to do it.
Thank you, Marshall. So that's what I was saying before. If we're going to say what should not, why can't we say what could be? And so finally, we got there, that we at least give some suggestion of what that cushion could be. So I think that's where we've been headed, but again, that we go round and around and around in this circle instead of coming up with that from the beginning. I think that's where we really need to be. What is the amount that we would actually give them as a cushion? I suggest that we do.
Mr. Mayfield?
Yeah, and having been involved in a number of Splosts and even an oversight committee at one point, I think what's important to think about as we make this decision is this $9 million allocation, and that we hold that piece of it accountable, because what ends up having to happen is that when those surpluses are created, then a decision has to be made about new projects, if you will, that will consume those dollars. And if there are cost overruns that are more than the $2.5 million, as an example, in this particular case, we can come back and reauthorize. But I guess what I want to make sure that we don't do, this is really what I'm concerned about, is that what we don't do is end up believing that we've got $2.5 million worth of surplus that somehow we can spend on another project when legally we haven't authorized ourselves to do that. We can, right.
So I have a comment, and then I think I've got a concrete proposal. So just so we have the math right, and someone would disagree with me if I have the numbers wrong, it's $6.5 million if all of them are these wall boards, which is $2,892 a piece. It's $7 million if it's 1939 of the cheaper wall boards and 305 of the more expensive wall boards. So it's actually $7 million if you go with mobile technology for all the trailers, as I read it. Given that, if we go with the current proposal, the 7.5 is a 15% buffer, which I feel like would probably give us more than enough room for the types of overruns you see, noting that they've already saved $1.5 million over the original Splost. This gives us two opportunities to save, Michael, the first of the 1.5 and then the second of whatever we come in below this one.
So, Mr. Chairman, so if Mr. Bradley comes in at the 6.5, we will get full credit on the 9.
Absolutely.
Right? So that would represent a savings of 2.5. Is that right?
Correct.
Oh, well, no problem.
So the proposal
Can I just say one more thing? And I think it's important, too, to recognize, and Mr. Coleman, respect what you're saying, but instead of looking at cheaper, looking at quality, and that whatever we do, that we get the best in quality, so we're not coming back because it's cheap and it falls off the wall, it doesn't stand, you can't roll it, you can't do anything with it, doesn't last. We want longevity, we want quality, and not looking at something because of the fact that it's cheap. We want to make sure that it stands the test of time so they're not coming back for another $6, $7, $8, $9 million later. So I think that we want to take that in consideration also when we're looking at it. At least I would like to make sure the best buck for the best quality of merchandise for the money that we're going to spend.
And I would like to make one final comment, if I could, Mr. Chairman, and that is about the process. But I need you. Is that okay?
But Mr. McMahon, and
Okay,
then,
I'm sorry.
No, go.
Well, yeah, and I think the process that he described, particularly as it relates to site surveys, in many other markets where these types of processes take place, that site survey is actually done prior to an RFP going out on the part of the internal organization, or the vendors who bid on it are responsible for that site survey, and their bid is responsible for meeting any of the contingencies that he describes. So I think that there are some opportunities for improvement in this entire process that will get the numbers closer to what they need to be, and to hold the vendors who are responsible for bidding on this accountable to those particular numbers. So the process is a little bit backwards, I think, for us, and we have an opportunity to improve on that.
Mr. McMahon.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Brantley, for an excellent job, and Mr. Clowers. I greatly appreciate y'all's information and detail. Now that we're about to accept this amendment and put it on the consent agenda for this evening, can you tell me a little bit, since this is almost 25% of our entire classrooms, timeline and expected completion of the project?
I'll turn that over to the project manager, Mr. Clowers.
Thank you, sir. One of the issues, as we discussed timeline, is that these boards cannot be done during the regular hours, primarily because you're actually drilling the sound, the noise, distraction for the classrooms or what have you. So this work will have to be done primarily after school, starting maybe 2 or 3 o'clock until, maybe 10 or 9 or 7, depending on the school that secondary school that you're in. They have different times that they start. So the other factor is the vendor themselves. And when I say the vendor themselves, is that it's like going from 0 to, okay, I want you to have so many people immediately to actually start up. But to cut through all the, I guess all the time frames, it could potentially take us to the end of close to the summer to actually complete these number boards because
I appreciate
of the
that.
constraints.
Do you feel comfortable that this project will be completed by, like you said, end of the summer, beginning of 2015 school year?
Definitely.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, will someone read the final action requested item? Mr. Brantley, you've heard everyone. Why don't we ask you to include the 10 or 15, whatever percentage you think will be more advantageous to you, and reread the requested action as you think it should be.
Yes, sir. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve CDWG to provide interactive board solution services, optional components, and accessories at a cost not to exceed $7.5 million. The purchase is being made via the Georgia State Contract number 99999 SPD 000048-0018.
Is there any opposition to placing this item on the consent agenda? Hearing none. Thank you for...
Thank you, Mr. Brantley, Mr.
Thank you,
Flowers.
Mr. Brantley.
Thank you.